Hey folks, I really don't want this to become the Everything Star Wars channel. I am not necessarily a Star Wars fan, not in terms of what the original movies were presenting, but at the same time, somebody that has written and been a writer for the better part of most people's lives, the last 20 years or so. And someone that studied it and the nature of actual creative and artistic writing and everything, and somebody that just respects the amount of effort that George Lucas put into his work, I feel as though I have to defend not him per se, but his vision, especially when I'm so often approached with idiocy, otherwise known as the internet. And what it comes down to is let's start with the facts because I want people to understand this. I get it. I have a small channel. I've been doing this for years. I've gotten nowhere. So there's no reason to listen to the old guy who's giving you the truth. But when it comes to telling stories, since the dawn of storytelling on a universally acceptable artistic sense, you have to have a plot, a main idea, and it needs to be discerned through the context and can be summed up in 2 sentences or less. This is grammar school teaching, okay? So it's not supposed to just be world building and character development. There has to be a purpose to those characters. And purpose is a good word for this particular video because it's got a lot to do with what's going on and what I'm about to discuss. Now, another fact, as I pointed out before, Star Wars was created by George Lucas, not a group of people, wasn't based off books, it was created by George Lucas. So everything that has his name on it, not this is originally created by George Lucas, but everything that's got his name in the writing, directing, and or producing is Star Wars. Everything else, no matter how you like it or not, they could be absolute literary masterpieces. It makes no difference. They're not Star Wars as per the creator saying so. So when I had that video a while ago where George Lucas was stating that expanded universe means nothing to him and is just a completely separate thing, it kind of angers me when I see so-called Star Wars fans who are not Star Wars fans quoting and claiming that according to his material, this expanded universe fan fiction somehow has any relevance, which leads me to what I'm about to talk about now. So I'm sure people that have played video games have heard of the series known as Knights of the Old Republic. Originally 2 games that were released on PC and, of course, Xbox 360, I believe. No, original Xbox and PlayStation 3 possibly, but not originally. I think originally it was just Xbox, but whatever the case, there were 2 games and then there was an MMORPG. What people are saying now is that they want to see the first game, or at least a movie dedicated to Revan from the first game. Okay, here's a problem. A few problems. First off, let's get into what Knights of the Old Republic originally was. You've heard of BioWare, right? And this kind of is connected in conjunction with my video that I did about Veilguard, which everyone missed the total point of the video, but considering their commentary, you missed the total point of video games in the first place. But when it comes down to it, Knights of the Old Republic was made by 3 Canadian doctors, otherwise known as nerds, who were big fans of Dungeons and Dragons. And what they wanted to do, like all of these rather rich people from the United States or wherever that are somehow born into the literary industry and want to make themselves into some kind of story or whatever, or get their legacy or immortalize themselves in a tale told that has nothing to do with actual tangible fundamentals in storytelling and writing and everything. What they like to do is they like to sort of take somebody else's vision and work and just kind of piggyback themselves on it so that they can make easy money. So originally, BioWare made a couple of Dungeons and Dragons based series, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, whatever. So they moved on to another wonderful geek fantasy known as Star Wars. And they had two games. One was released in 2003, and the other one was released 2 years later, that were, from what I originally remembered, two games I enjoyed, but that was mostly because I was used to the Square Enix games I grew up with, which were complete dog shit, not just because the storylines were terrible, as they were simply retelling Star Wars in their own little way, which was typically convoluted, but because the combat mechanics were very limited. And the character development in terms of the actual gameplay was also limited. So here was this series of games that gave you the ability to almost act as if you were a Jedi, almost give yourself the ability to build your character as you would want, and of course had romance options and other things related to dialogue, so you didn't simply see a static story unfolding in front of you and you can't say, please God, let this end, get me off this idiotic ride. Never. You just have to sit through it. In this case, you can kind of pick what dialogue you want, and you ultimately got a different end or a different concept of the game that you were playing. I mean, light or dark, Renegade or Paragon, one or the other. It's BioWare after all. But when it originally came out, the first one anyway, it was not too long after Attack of the Clones. And there were certain inconsistencies, but I kind of ignored them for a bit because, as I said, when it came to the gameplay, which, my God, why do I have to say this to people, is the most important aspect of playing a game. Gameplay. Playing a game. Not storytelling, gameplay. But whatever, you enjoy what you want to enjoy. I don't understand why I have to say that, but I have to say that. That gameplay is the most important aspect and should be the main focus from the game developers of making a game, as opposed to trying to make cinema in cutscenes. Just let you know, but you believe what you want to believe. Be that as it may, I found the inconsistencies, and then I played the game again recently, and I was like, wow, these games completely missed the point. And man, they're not that good. So the idea of making it into a movie just sort of makes me want to pull what's left of my hair out. Now, for those of you that never played at least the original one, let me tell you exactly what these numbnuts are trying to insist as Star Wars fans, what needs to be put on cinema or in the movie screen, the movie theater, whatever. This takes place over 1,000 years before, I guess, the Phantom Menace, because that's the great excuse. That's the cop-out. Well, this was, so many years before, like the Acolyte or whatever. And just like the Acolyte, Jedi Knights fight with their hoods and cloaks on and have gloves. Because, when George Lucas makes Star Wars, you see it all the time. But in this version of the universe, which they want to turn into cinematic canon, if you will, the Mandalorians, who I believe, according to BioWare, were a race of people from the planet Mandalore, as they're supposed to be. But then again, they keep calling their leader Mandalore, and I don't see any women amongst them. So it seems as though it's like a biker gang or whatever it was that the Mandalorian was trying to put together. They had these things called basilisks. Yes, totally all over the Clone Wars CGI series that went to the actual planet Mandalore with the Duchess and all that stuff, that simply crashed onto planets and absolutely obliterated everything related to the Republic, to the point where the Republic had to respond. And their response, of course, was doing nothing. They just sat there trying to figure out what they needed to accomplish and how they were going to go about accomplishing it, including the Jedi Council, who, when I'm done, you'll say, and I thought the Acolyte made Jedi look bad. So these two fully trained Jedi Knights, with the Force as their allies, Revan and his or her apprentice Malik, because you can choose, decide to go on a space odyssey around the universe to find something called the Star Forge, which was ultimately almost a synthetic and organic battle station that could endlessly produce battleships. Now, who's flying all these battleships? I don't know. Let's say Santa Claus. I don't even care. But what I'm trying to tell you is that this machine that was kind of like a giant starship that almost had both synthetic and organic matter created by something so long in the past, once more going even further back, was able to make ships on the fly. And they did it by sucking out the force from organic beings, like it's drinking Kool-Aid. So it sounds very similar to, I don't know, say, Reapers, right? And that's pretty much what it was. It was Dungeons and Dragons in space, because you had classes with your Jedi where they can be more like engineers or warriors or force mages, because yes, the force is magic again. They're wizards after all. They can barely fight, barely defend themselves, as we saw when Obi-Wan lost his lightsaber in his fight with Jango Fett, who was wearing full Mandalorian armor, and Obi-Wan was handling himself without his lightsaber. But no, according to these games, Jedi are completely helpless without their lightsabers, just so you know. So Revan and Malak discover this, and it turns the tide, pretty much decimating the Mandalorians to stop the war, which the Jedi Council wasn't too keen on, but so many people in the Republic thought it was a great idea and followed Revan into battle, ultimately following Revan towards the dark side, because now there are Sith armies. And Revan doesn't find a Dark Lord to pray to and destroy Malak to show his obedience. Malak and Darth Revan just call themselves Darths. It's just that simple. They just become dark, because according to this game, being dark is just being mean. It's taking the renegade option. It's kicking people, it's tripping old people, it's punching them in the face, like I said before. Just being mean, just being the obvious jerk-off makes you a Sith. And every one of these thousands and millions of people that joined the Sith army in another war between the Republic and somebody who thinks they're too weak, it's just another one of these groups of obnoxious English people that keep spouting out about power over weakness and everything. Power without a purpose has no purpose. That's not what the Sith are about. And to have all these people looking to take over something and destroy everything in their path, it's kind of counterproductive, is it not? After all, they're only supposed to be 2. And yet now we've got thousands. They even opened a Sith Academy and had their own Sith oath that they took, which was more or less the opposite of the Jedi oath that they took. And the Jedi, what was it, mantra, I would say, or adage, or whatever it is, their code is simply reversed or said in the opposite for the Sith code, as these Sith lords, I guess, just spring out of nowhere and start a whole new revolution. Now, where does your main character get involved in all this? Well, your main character is sort of a blank slate, soldier of some kind, trapped in a battle as the Sith apprentice of Revan, who suddenly disappeared or was conquered or whatever, has now kidnapped a very important Jedi Knight named, what was her name again? Basicala, don't give a fuck. She was voiced over by Jennifer Hale. And she was a pretty hot piece of ass. And I think she could have been a romance option too, because Jedi get romance now and romance each other, and it's no big deal. She had this battle meditation, which pretty much was a Jedi buff spell, where everybody would get rallied up and they'd increase their damage output and everything like that. So you remember back during the Clone Wars, either the series or in that battle on Geonosia, when the Jedi, or at least one of them, maybe it was Kit Fisto, just went like this with their hands, and then a spell overcame everybody, and they were fighting at a ridiculously high rate. And you also remember how Jedi would have to hit people with their lightsabers at least 50 times to kill them, because it's one of those games too. I guess outside the barge battle in Jabba's palace, when Gamorrean troops and guards and everything were just getting battered around like with the lightsabers as if they were being hit by electronic bats. I guess aside from that, you know, if you're basing it off of that concept, yeah, it fits perfectly. But aside from that, lightsabers pretty much obliterate everything untouched because they're laser swords. Not in this game. This game you have damage rolls, like in Dungeons and Dragons. See what I'm saying here? And ultimately what happens is you try to get her back, you have to find her, and then you have to trace Revan's steps, only to find out that ultimately your character, whether it was a he or a she, was actually the whole time Darth Revan. And how did Darth Revan know that or not know that? They found out because it just kind of comes out ultimately when they speak to, I forgot who. The Jedi Council then doesn't deny it, but at the same time, they decided to take this Revan that they kidnapped and use the Force to mentally reprogram so that he or she didn't remember what they did, who they were, or anything related to them being Jedi Knights. And then the Jedi Council takes them on again and sends them on this journey, knowing who they full are originally, and that they might, well, turn again, maybe. And originally, they're acting like they're a completely different person because, it's one of those Star Wars things where it's not a lifetime commitment based on the Jedi Council find you through the Force. You just roll up there at the Jedi Academy and go, yeah, so what's up, man? I heard about this Jedi shit and thought I would sign up. Like, it's one of those things. You have people that you can recruit as your own apprentices, and they're in their 20s and 30s and have never used the Force before. You have this, I think, tiger chick who I would have fucked the shit out, but whatever. I might have seen one of her people in one of those bounty hunters from episodes 1, 2, and 3 in the Clone Wars series, the really spicy chick that was hanging out with Boba Fett for a while and everything. Could have been, but she has stripes. She looks like a tiger. I don't know. Who turned to the dark side by being wooed in some darkened spot in the Dantooine Jedi Center, whatever the fuck it was, and killed her master, because that's all you got to do. You just got to be really, really bad. And was somewhat upset, was sort of feeling guilty about it, but wasn't really acting as though she was until you kind of talk her out of it. And then she starts moralizing with you as she becomes one of your team members. So it's just absolute garbage in every way related to Star Wars. It makes no sense whatsoever. And the whole idea of the game itself and its mechanics, it works, but then call it something else, is what I say. If you can't come up with your own idea, don't offshoot someone else's and then just totally mutate it into something completely different. Just come up with your own idea, change the names or what have you, or say to the person that is making the original material, what would you do? Can we collaborate? Do that. Look, I don't care if LucasArts' name is on the games. LucasArts would put its name on fucking condoms. It doesn't make any difference. The truth of the matter is, I played the games again after all the different role-playing games and other mindless button mashing games. That's all video games are, apparently. Really deep, intuitive, and concisely interesting, concise, totally in-depth, real serious, real emotionally investing, thought-provoking video games that require you to sit through 40-plus minutes of side quests and cutscenes and people trying to act and all this other shit and all that cinematic crap, or it's just mindless stomping on a gamepad. That's all video games are. It's one or the other. But despite the mechanics being something I liked when I originally played it, as I said, once I got deeper into other role-playing games that gave me a better sense of strategy, more customization with my characters and everything like that, once I found better role-playing games than fucking Final Fantasy and this, I realized this game wasn't really all that good. And when I saw how it destroyed George Lucas's vision that stems from a man falling to darkness against his own will to save his family and then redeeming himself, becoming all of this idiotic world building, which has nothing to do with the world he originally built. Once I got back into it, I realized, man, they really missed the mark. And they kind of, in the second one, almost sort of redeemed themselves as the Sith Lords game, as it was called. Almost rectifies their ignorance, but at the same time, there were some decent characters in it, but at the same time, you are suddenly a rift in the Force that can destroy the Force, well, then all of life is completely done, because that's not how it works. And the original game had all that stupid shit with characters that disconnect themselves from the Force, like it's just a plug, like in Jedi Outcast and all this other stupid crap that these other video game developers make and whatever. Point is, the games themselves, in terms of storytelling, and this is one of the reasons why I don't care for these developers' concepts of storytelling, were terrible. And the gameplay itself, not worth going back and playing through. Not for me, anyway. I mean, if you like that kind of dice roll, old-fashioned PC, click and point and wait, Dungeons and Dragons type game, cool, you might enjoy it. But for the most part, it wasn't anything that after I played through once, I wanted to make a project of like I originally thought I would. So the idea of turning that into a movie is so nonsensical and so moronic, and above all, not what a Star Wars fan would want. So once again, as I said in videos years ago, you're not Star Wars fans. If you don't like George Lucas's vision and you don't like his movies, but you like all of the expanded universe stuff that he said is not Star Wars, and video game stories like this, where anyone can be a Jedi, anyone can grab a lightsaber, you got a Republic, and you got an Order, but just anyone can do it as long as they pass a few weeks of Jedi training or whatever. If you don't like the idea of it being a lifetime commitment, and you can't get married, and you can't have relationships, and all that other stuff, like personal, intimate relationships and everything, then you don't like Star Wars. If Anakin Skywalker isn't your main character and the center of your Star Wars experience, then you're not a Star Wars fan. You can't be a fan of something you don't like. The expanded universe isn't Star Wars. Stuff like this isn't Star Wars. So for so-called Star Wars fans to continue to complain that Disney needs to harp on the expanded universe or something like this, that just makes me nuts. And I feel is such a disgrace, such a discredit to the man who originally made the series and called them his children. But then again, this is the internet, and that's all they do. They claim they like something and then bash it to no end. So, listen, am I saying that episodes 1, 2, and 3 are the greatest movies of all time? Of course not. They are flawed, but they're still better than the original ones, but whatever. They're still flawed movies, and they're not some of my favorites, although Revenge of the Sith, I really, really like. But technically and fundamentally, they are good, or at least decent cinema. Decent, I would say. I wouldn't go nuts. I'd say decent cinema. Still for kids, more or less, but did invite a broader audience than the original, which was more or less just Trekkies and 12-year-olds. That's what George Lucas said. This game, if you want to, you can watch a walkthrough of it. It's really stupid. How BioWare made it almost work is kind of impressive, but it's just really stupid. That's not the point. To say you're a Star Wars fan and want to see this shit made into cinema as though Disney needs to do it now because their stories are better. This is even worse than what Disney's made for the most part. So all you have to do if you're Disney is just go to the man who owns the most stock shares in your company and say, George, what do you got? That's all you gotta do. You don't have to worry about a Revan, you don't have to worry about a Plagueis or a Palpatine backstory. Just go to the man himself and say, dude, what do you got? Remember the original deal where you were gonna write and we were gonna, yeah, let's do that. Nobody remembers anything from about 20 minutes ago, so they'll forget about all that shit. I mean, who remembers Solo movie? Who remembers any of that fucking trash with Rey anyway? Like, who remembers anything like the Kenobi show, whatever? Who remembers all that garbage anyway, or the Book of Boba? Let's just pretend it never happened, and you do it. But for God's sakes, whatever you do, don't make Knights of the Republic and the Revan side story into anything. I'm begging you. And thank you all for watching. I have more videos soon to come. So stay tuned, take care, and have a great day.